So I hope you had a good lunch. Right now, we're going to discuss from protest to policy. How do we translate so many massive movements into concrete change in policy? So I'm Thiago Avila. I'll be your moderator for this panel. I'm part of the Freedom Flotilla Coalition Steering Committee. And I'm very glad to be here with our panelists. I'll be introducing each and every one of them. And the idea is to have quick questions and presentations from them, and then we bring the discussion to the whole group, okay? So, I'll start from right here. For this panel right now, we have one of our panelists is Shamiul Joarder. And Shamiul Joarder serves as Head of Public Affairs at Friends of Al-Aqsa, a prominent UK-based organization dedicated to advocating for Palestinian rights and raising awareness of issues surrounding the Al-Aqsa Mosque and the broader Palestinian cause. In this capacity, he leads strategic communications and public engagement efforts to influence policy, mobilize support, and foster international solidarity. Shamiul has been featured in a variety of documentaries and media platforms, leveraging these opportunities to articulate the complexities of the Palestinian struggle and the importance of global advocacy. Welcome, Shamiul. A quick round of applause for our brother Shamiul. We are going now to Priyanka Devani. And Priyanka is a human rights advocate and global education leader, currently serving as Global Programs Director at Think Equal. She works at the intersection of trauma-informed education, gender equity and justice, and as the founder of the Silk Road Music Group, supporting conflict-affected communities through the arts. Deeply engaged in Palestinian advocacy, she partners with UNRWA in Gaza and is part of a landmark genocide case filmed the Supreme Court of Barbados. Thank you for being here, Priyanka. Now we're going to Ben Jamal. Ben Jamal is the director of Palestine Solidarity Campaign, PSC, a leading organization based in Britain advocating for Palestinian rights and justice, with extensive experience in grassroots activism, public speaking, and media engagement. He plays a pivotal role in shaping PSC messaging and mobilizing support across diverse communities. Renowned for his articulate advocacy on issues such as Israeli occupation, human rights, and international law, Ben consistently highlights the importance of global solidarity in pursuing a just resolution for Palestine. His work includes collaborating with policymakers, organizing public events, and contributing to wider discussion on peace, equality, and justice in the Middle East. Thank you, Ben Jamal, for being here. Now, Leah Levane. Leah Levane is co-chair of Jewish Voice for Labor, which defends the Palestinian solidarity movement from false anti-Semitism allegation. JVL, whose executive members were later expelled by Labour, ironically over related accusations, plays a key role in the Jewish bloc at London and other demonstrations, countering claims of anti-Semitism. Leah represents JVL on Global Jews for Palestine, with member organizations in 20 countries worldwide. She has a background in community development focused on justice, racial equality, and asylum seeker rights. Thank you for being here, Leah. And we have Badlishah Baharin bin Baharin, is chairman of the Palestine Center of Excellence in Malaysia. And he holds a BSc from the University of Leeds and MSc from UMIST, and taught at University Putra Malaysia for over 30 years, publishing extensively and earning recognitions at top research scientists in 2012. He has held leadership roles at UPM and supervised numerous graduate students. In civil society, he chaired the Malaysian Action Coalition, promoting unity and inclusion, and serves on Parliament's cross-party groups on integrity and the National Harmony Committee. Thank you, Badlishah, for being here. And we have also with us Pádraig Lochlainn. Pádraig is Sinn Féin TD for Donegal and serves as party chief whip at Oireachtas. With extensive experience across the local and national government, he has held senior roles during chair of the Oireachtas Public Service Oversight and Petitions Committee, as Sinn Féin spokesperson on fisheries, marine, foreign affairs, and justice. He's a committee advocate for Palestinian independence, serves as secretaries of Oireachtas, Friends of Palestine group, where he promotes international solidarity and human rights. Thanks for being here, Pádraig. So the idea of this discussion today is to bring how we are in a very symbolic place, because everywhere in the world we see that in the global north countries, Britain has been the place where people have mobilized the biggest numbers in demonstrations. So here's quite a symbolic place to discuss this. How do we translate so much potential for mobilization into concrete change in policy? So we still didn't build people's power, and we will eventually, but until then, how do we transform into this? So the idea was to bring quick questions to all of you. I'll start from here, from Shamiul, and then we'll go, the next one we'll do backwards. So the first question is, what are the examples, successful or failed, where protests led to tangible shifts in law, policy, or institutional accountability? And what were the critical factors for that?
Is that all? That's pretty long. So my brain doesn't work that much, right? So look, if we're looking from protest to policy, strategic influence, what we're looking at is how do we change, is this echoey, is this right? It's okay, cool. It's how do we influence government? How do we influence policymakers? So the question, I suppose, is what's been successful and what hasn't? It's how we look at this question as well. We're looking. I was speaking to some people in the break just now about what does politics mean and how much emphasis should we be giving in Palestine into politics. You know, you mentioned about the people power. I think, you know, it's not until we get people power. People power is actually what drives everything. People power is what's going to drive the change. We need to ensure that, yes, obviously part of my work is in Parliament, speaking to parliamentarians, pushing the issue of Palestine, making sure that uphold international law. But I've been in this game long enough to know a lot of people, unfortunately, in Parliament and those in power, I'm sure in other countries, don't really care that much, unfortunately. What we need to understand is the change has come because the people have made the politicians change. It's a grassroots support that makes people change. If you look at, for example, even last couple of days, in terms of whether it's Keir Starmer making these waffling noises in terms of not really saying anything. It's been, again, because people power has continuously for the last 21 months been pushing the fact that we need to change. And when it comes back to, in terms of what are an example, we can look at the last general election. The last general election was based on that people power. No ceasefire, no vote came on the back of the protests. I remember coming up with no ceasefire, no vote on my sofa. It came up from people understanding no ceasefire, no vote. If you don't for a ceasefire, you're not going to get our vote. And that people power at every protest for months and months, no ceasefire, no vote. People understanding that if your parliamentarian, if your wannabe MP didn't vote for a ceasefire, you're not going to vote for them. They do not earn your vote. That showed that our change comes from the people. Yes, in terms of success, there was limited success. There were 5 independent MPs that stood on Gaza. But what we also need to really acknowledge is the fact that so many majority of was slashed. Those who supported, voted against the ceasefire, their majority in those areas was slashed. So come to next election, now they're in a position where they could lose their seat. And that's a huge success for us as a movement. And it came, again, from people power.
Okay, can you hear me?
Thank you, Leah.
Great. So I think you've covered most of it, really. The main thing I wanted to add was that, and Lindsay alluded to this before lunch, that it's painfully slow. It took more than 100 years in this country to get universal suffrage. And people were murdered in that process, and most famously at Peterloo in 1819 and at Newport in 1838. It took until 1928 for everyone to have the vote in this country. Now, we don't want to spend 100 years. We've already been spending 70-odd years for Palestine. They are paying a horrendous, terrible, terrible price. But it's like the wheels are turning and we don't quite know what will tip it. Who thought the Berlin Wall would fall? Who thought that the end of state communism would end? A lot of that was people power, and when it changes, it changes. Famously, people have said it's always too difficult until it happens. We have to keep going. We don't know yet what the impact has been. Shamiul has described some of them. I can tell you, to my absolute astonishment, just in the last couple of days, and those of you in Britain and anywhere, you know, the most establishment Jewish organizations, the absolute apologists for everything that Israel has done and is doing, have finally gone, oh, oops, maybe they've gone a bit too far. We better do something. We should probably say something about the starvation. Why bombing, maiming, all the other things we know about wasn't enough. But this has pushed even those apologist organizations over the edge, the ones who've been making our life very difficult. So, yeah, it is people power that will change the policy. And we have to work at all levels. We have to keep the street going and the lobbying and the intellectual analysis. But the protests are a key part of it. That's all I want to say, really.
Thank you, Leah. Pádraig.
Okay. I want to thank our comrade Frank, Reverend Frank from South Africa, for his excellent speech earlier. And he prompted a lot of thoughts in my mind. He reminded us that it wasn't till the very end that the powerful countries removed their support for the apartheid regime. It started on the ground. So in Ireland, our first resistance to the apartheid regime came from workers, from mostly women, but some men, who refused to handle fruit in a supermarket in Dublin called Dunn's Stores. They refused to do it. And they were very isolated, and eventually grassroots support built up. That was in 1984. A few years later, Ireland actually led the way in taking sanctions against the apartheid South African regime. So it starts with just ordinary people, workers, who sometimes shame their political leaders into doing what's right, and eventually you win. So we need to learn that all of the protests, and I understand some of the speakers earlier said that we need to do more than protest, and we're all in despair at what we see in Gaza. But we will win eventually. They have revealed their true nature, this Zionist genocidal regime. They have revealed their real nature, and just like what happened in South Africa, they will be defeated in due course. One last point I'd like to make is that in terms of South Africa and Ireland, I'm from Donegal, which is at the very northwest of Ireland. And one of my heroes was a local public representative who was loved by our people. His name was Eddie Fullerton. Eddie was assassinated by Margaret Thatcher's agents in 1991. They used weapons in South Africa. So the South African apartheid regime worked with Margaret Thatcher's regime to bring South African weapons to cause murder and mayhem in my island. Margaret Thatcher's regime was eventually defeated, and so was the South African regime. So I want to give two examples of how right and goodness wins through eventually if we remain united, remain focused, and we stay true to our course.
Thank you, Pádraig. Badlishah.
Yeah. How do you? Can you hear me? Oh yes. Okay. First of all, I would like to say I come from a country where its government and its leaders have been vocal about the Palestinian issue on the international stage. My prime minister have been I think, outspoken and on the international stage for the issue of Palestine. And alhamdulillah, we have also organized a lot of campaigns for Palestine in Malaysia, and also we have also organized humanitarian aids to Gaza. And now we are trying to do a campaign of boycott of the complicit companies in Malaysia, so that they don't get any government contracts, They are not awarded any contracts by the private sector and so on. We're doing a huge campaign on that now. Now, back to the question by Thiago. Yeah, I agree. People power is one of the important steps towards changing from protest to policy. Yeah? But even with people power, you need to have strategies as well. What's the strategic focus? Which people, which segment do you focus on? Yeah? We had an experience in Malaysia where there was about more than 10 years ago, my organization was involved in a campaign. We call it Bersih campaign. Bersih is a Malay word meaning clean. That is campaigning for free and fair elections in Malaysia. Okay, it started more than 10 years ago. We did huge street demonstrations for 5 years in a row. And each demonstration, we managed to get more than, 250,000 people coming down to the streets, which in Malaysia is a very big number. Maybe in England, in UK, it's not a big number, but in Malaysia, 250,000 people coming down the streets is a huge number. And so we targeted the youth especially. We targeted the youth because Malaysia is a youthful country. In the population, in this population, more than roughly 60% are youth. So therefore, we targeted the youth. We put in education for the youth, calling for free and fairer elections. And in the end, after the Bersih campaign has ended and it resulted in some policy outcomes in which there was a revamp of the election rules and legislation and so on. But after that, because we focus on the youth started to have their own campaign for the voting age to be lowered from 21 years old to 18 years old. And it was successful as well. So we have to have strategic focus. I mean, in terms of people power is good, but you have to have strategic focus, depending, of course, on your situation and context. Different countries have got different proportions of populations and so on, segments of populations. We have to work within our own context and devise those strategies for targeting certain segments of the population. Now, the other one that we focused on was on the media. Yeah? That means we have to come out with media narratives that resonates with the people. Okay, so calling for free and fair elections. That means we are telling them that if we campaign for this, if this is successful, then Malaysia will be a country whereby we can elect the best leaders for our country, for our nation. So that was our rallying call: elect the best leaders, not the corrupt ones. Not the ones who's going to ruin the country, but elect the best leaders. That was the rallying call, and that was the narrative. And alhamdulillah, it also resonates with the people. So we have to find that narrative. We have to find the strategic core or segment of population that we want to focus on. And I think we can do that. So I think that's all for the first round. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Badlishah. Now, Priyanka.
Sure, thank you for having me, and thank you to the fellow speakers and to all of the speeches that have gone before. So I wear many hats, but today I am representing the Caribbean Against Apartheid in Palestine movement, because I live in between here and the Caribbean. We were set up in 2014 and are essentially a regional alliance of small island states across the Caribbean who believe that we need to be greater than the sum of our parts in order to stand up against apartheid in Palestine and to also hold Caribbean island states' governments to account. We were set up in 2014 and began essentially with symbolic wins, protests, protests, cultural boycotts, academic boycotts, and then started to, as the previous speaker has said, started to develop these symbolic wins into very structured campaigns. Since 1967, Barbados has always recognized that there needs to be a two-state solution, but ironically has never recognized Palestine as a state. This symbolic, this achievement happened only last year after sustained grassroots mobilization, after concerted efforts by all of the separate Caribbean states, and last year in April 2024, after Jamaica recognized Palestine as a state, so did Barbados. This has now led us to develop, as I've said, more structured campaigns, but also because we are smaller, we are able to become closer to state actors and enforce universal jurisdiction as domestic law. So we have recently now launched a landmark trial against the Supreme Court, in the Supreme Court in Barbados as a genocide case, where we are holding the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the Director of Public Prosecutions, and the Immigration Department accountable to enforce, because they have adopted the Genocide Convention and the Geneva Convention. We are holding the government to say, now you need to enforce this as domestic law. So we have taken 6 actions, and the case was heard a couple of weeks ago, and now we are asking the Barbados to essentially investigate or prosecute anyone on Barbadian soil who has been involved in the genocide. There are a number of IDF soldiers that are on the island at the moment. We have received several witness statements and are now currently gathering a lot of evidence to take this trial to court. Since then, because we are a regional alliance, a number of other Caribbean states have started to follow suit. So my point around critical success factors is believing in an alliance and to really information share, to have concerted actions, to believe in the power of protest, because symbolic wins ignite the fire and they light the fire for sustained and deep transformation.
Thank you, Priyanka. Now, Ben.
This is a challenge because everyone's being commendably brief, and I've got to now try and match that standard. So, look, the question here, where have we got evidence that protest leads to tangible shifts in policy and in institutional accountability? I want to start briefly by just looking at, from my organisation's perspective, Palestine Solidarity Campaign, what's our fundamental theory of change? What do we see as our role? And we believe that the role of a solidarity movement, of solidarity organisations, is to support the resistance of an oppressed people to their oppression, to support their struggle for liberation, by creating external pressure on their oppressor. And the way that we do that, our task is in our own domains to end every aspect of complicity with that oppression. That means ending the complicity of our government, and that means full arms embargo, full body of sanctions. It means ending the complicity of public bodies, and that means specifically local authorities, universities, national health trusts that are complicit through the companies that they invest in and that they procure from, and it means ending the complicity of those companies and corporations themselves. And what's the second dimension of our theory of change? It's the one that we've heard from everyone. It is the belief that even in deeply flawed democratic structures, that popular pressure can create levers of change. Now, if we're looking for tangible evidence, and if we start with the first of those dimensions, where is the evidence, even right now, in the context of nearly 2 years of a genocide and now the forced starvation of a people that is seeing people dropping dead on the streets of Gaza through organ failure? Where is the evidence that this extraordinary body of pressure that we have built in this country has led to tangible shifts in government policy? They are very thin on the ground. Every single one of you knows the inadequacy of the response. But I refer back to what Frank said this morning, that we know governments are the last to act. And we are now seeing actually the impact of this extraordinary body of pressure. Anybody who's been watching David Lammy in the last week, I don't think I've ever in my life seen a politician so physically uncomfortable with the position that he is publicly having to maintain. He had a question thrown at him in Parliament last week by a Tory MP. Don't you consider the possibility right now that you're going to end up in The Hague? His body language said that's exactly what is on my mind at the moment, but it hasn't led to any change in policy. So if I'm looking at tangible evidence, and if I narrow this, let's look at the last 2 years of the horror we've been confronting, and where have we seen tangible shifts? Well, I'm going to focus on institutional accountability. One of the campaigns we launched about 3 years ago was a campaign targeting local government pension schemes. We did research that demonstrated collectively they invest £4 billion in companies complicit in the oppression of the Palestinian people. We launched that campaign. We knew this was long and hard work. We had to put it on hold because the government then decided to introduce an anti-boycott law that would make it illegal for councils to do what we were asking them to do. They would not be allowed to make a divestment decision if the issue of concern was Israel's violation of the rights of the Palestinian people. We got together a coalition of 80 organisations. We succeeded in delaying the passage of that legislation. It fell when the last government fell. That was about a year ago, July last year. Since then, 16 councils have now made commitments to divest. Why do I think that has happened? Because they are all looking at upcoming local council elections. As Shamiul said, they're all looking at what happened in the last general election. How did we build those victories? What were the key ingredients? Well, we did the research. We provided them with the evidence of where are you complicit. We presented them with an argument based on what are your legal and moral responsibilities. You have responsibilities to not violate international law through the investments that you make. And then we are going to give you, we're asking you to pass motions that accept that general responsibility, and we're providing you with the evidence of where you're actually violating that commitment. And then we built grassroots pressure. We have a network of over 100 branches. And so those councils were subject to petitions, to protests, to disruptions, to sit in at all of their meetings until we secured those victories. The second example I would use, we launched a campaign, Don't Buy Apartheid. There was a call in line with the call across the global BDS movement for every shop, every supermarket in the UK to stop selling Israeli goods. Within 2 months of the launch of that campaign, the British supermarket, the Co-op, had a motion passed as its AGM and then committed to implement that motion that it will withdraw all Israeli goods from its shelves. Again, what won that? That won through presenting the evidence, presenting the arguments, and then again grassroots pressure. Pressure on the members of the Co-op, a lobbying campaign of the members of the Co-op, to say you should not be supporting the sale of goods that right now are supporting a state that's implementing a genocide. So that's where I'd give sort of evidence of the power of grassroots pressure to implement change.
Thank you so much, Ben. Now for the next question. When me and Yasmin were on the Madeleine, after we left the boat, after the illegal interception, the kidnapping, and we got back to our homes, people said, what a huge victory that was. And the press and the media was always pushing us to say that we had a victory, that this was not only a symbolic win, but a concrete win for us. And we would refrain from that. We would always say, look, do we have a humanitarian corridor to Gaza? No, we don't. There are still starving children in Gaza? Yes. So how can we call this a victory? And the idea of the next question will be to discuss precisely that. After the Madeleine, Israel attacked Iran, after Global March to Gaza, Sumud convoy, and all this amazing mobilization that filled the streets again, inspired a lot of people to mobilize again, we had a lot of other defeats in the Zionist project advancing and increasing violations in many ways. So the idea would be to discuss with you right now, starting from Ben, how do we distinguish the symbolic wins from structural change in our advocacy and mobilization strategy? How do we go from the symbolic wins to structural change?
Yeah, and look, this is one of the key questions and one of the most difficult questions. And I know that Mustafa, in what he said earlier, and in a question he put, rightly wants to put everyone on the spot about this, which is, how do you know you're having impact? And in the type of work we all do, that is incredibly difficult to measure. My frame of response always, and this is to me what it means when we're also considering the question, is what we're doing strategic? And that means, Noam Chomsky once gave an answer to this question, what does it mean to be strategic? And he said, well, consider this. What I'm about to do, is it going to increase my power and the power of the movement and reduce the power of my opponents or not? And that's something you should always have in your mind when you're looking to do anything. And if I go back to what I said about the theory of change, that if what we are doing is seeking to end the complicity of every aspect of our society, government, public bodies, companies and corporations, is what we are about to do. And if we win a victory, does that victory increase the possibility of achieving that outcome? Or does it make no difference, or does it even reduce that possibility? And so you have difficult sort of challenges, and trying to judge, is this taking us forward? Is it not taking us forward? If I was trying to look at examples of where those dilemmas are acute, I'd look at the work we at PSC have tried to do within the trade union movement, where you are constantly faced with the battle on, are we getting what we want at the moment? Is this actually taking us to the point where we're ending all of the complicity of our trade union movement at the moment? You know, we have trade union members of this country that are handling goods that are being shipped to Israel. We have trade union members that are working in complicit companies. How do we end that complicity? And so you sometimes come across the question, and we face this when you begin sometimes with trade unions and trying to get motions passed, policies passed. Now, when you've got a policy passed, is that a victory if you've won a successful campaign to get them to pass a motion, or is it just symbolic? And to me, you keep coming back. Is this taking them in the right direction? Is it a step towards what we want them to do next? For many, many years at PSC, the battle we fought within the trade union movement was try to get them to adopt the right frame of understanding, the right description and understanding of what is the nature of the oppression of the Palestinian people. For a long time, we tried to get them to understand we're dealing with a structure of apartheid here. We're not dealing simply with a military occupation, and that's the extent of the problem. We are dealing with an overarching structure of apartheid that affects every dimension of Palestinian society, including those in exile denied the right of return. That is part of the structure of apartheid, and that is your frame of understanding that you need to adopt. And it took many, many years. We began by getting a motion passed that said, oh, we may be on the road to apartheid. And we had many people saying, that's a defeat, because we're at apartheid. We've been at apartheid for a long time. But our thinking was, we're taking them down a journey. So the question always was, is it taking us forward? We got a very current example within the Unite the Union. It's no secret to anybody that the policy of Unite the Union under its current leadership went backwards, significantly backwards. It was a major obstacle to what we're trying to do with the trade union movement. There were many people saying what we have to do about that, and particularly my organisation, where Unite is an affiliate, is abandon our relationship with Unite the Union, because they are now an anchor and a drag on what we're trying to achieve. Our strategy was to work internally within Unite the Union, to mobilise the grassroots of the union, to put internal pressure. At their last conference, they had 17 motions on Palestine, more than any other issue. And where that took the leadership was to pass a statement that I think is a seismic step forward on the journey we want them to be. It says they will support any member who refuses to be complicit, for example, by handling goods that are being shipped to Israel, including weapons. That's a seismic move for Unite the Union. But whether or not this is a symbolic victory or a real victory now depends on, do they implement that? So our task now, we think we've got an opening, is to apply pressure at every level of Unite to say, you've passed this, you have to implement it. And that's the task. So these are, that's a sort of very general answer, but I think the question for me always comes back with, do you have a clear understanding of where you're trying to go? And is there a way of measuring and being clear about, is this a step towards that, or are we actually taking a step backwards?
Thank you, Ben. Now, Priyanka.
Thank you, Ben. I think you've said most of what I was going to say, but I think we can all agree that symbolic wins aren't devoid of merit, right? So I like to think of symbolic wins as doors. They don't change the room, but they open a path to get in and do the deeper work. So essentially, they lay the groundwork for deeper transformation, and that's what we've seen in our experience at CAP. Just to think about kind of symbolic wins, so they often provide visibility, they provide momentum, they help to shape and shift narratives, and they really help to energize and galvanize movements, which we have seen so far. We've seen so many different Palestine Alliance movements set up, but we've now seen alliances develop through protests, through the amazing student encampments that have been led by the youth, by the Palestinian youth movements, by the younger generation. And so I think as well as the campus encampments, some of the statements of solidarity. I come from an artistic background. I think the artist boycotts that we've seen at music festivals, the idea of artists, music festivals also divesting from companies that have been complicit in Israeli settlements has been a huge win for us, but has started off in protest. Are all kind of examples of how we've seen these symbolic wins lead to actual direct action and divestment and sanctions. So I think when we think of some of these examples, obviously temporary ceasefires and pauses in violence don't address the root causes, but I think that the protests and the viral campaigns that we've seen on social media do. They could be seen as symbolic wins, but they have really, really helped to raise awareness. And I'd like to say a specific example of some of the Palestinian social media, influencers, or you may even call them journalists now, these young Gazan journalists like Wissam, who have really, really, now with an Instagram following of 5 million followers, have really raised awareness about what is going on and what are the on-the-ground realities that are happening in the face of a number of journalists being targeted. So I think in terms of what are the key distinctions between symbolic wins and structural change, I feel that we have to ask ourselves 4 questions. The durability of the change. Is the change permanent or is it reversible when we're thinking through our actions? The power shift. Does it transfer power? Do our actions transfer power and resources to the oppressed? And then the systemic impact. Does it alter, do our actions alter the root causes, or do they just alter the symptoms? And, a very important example here is BDS and direct action. Palestine Action is a very good example here of over a sustained 1-year campaign at Barclays Bank was able to get them to divest completely from Elbit systems. So I think that's the third. And finally, the accountability mechanisms. Do we have practical tools to enforce and sustain these changes? So I think, in terms of the takeaways on advocacy strategies, I think we should treat symbolic wins as mobilizing tools, not end goals. They're enablers. We use them to build momentum towards deeper measurable transformation. We use symbolic moments and we translate them into structural campaigns. And we have the right structures in our alliances to ensure that we have concrete goals. So if we're having student encampments or student protests, let's ensure that they then lead to very specific, tangible actions like divestment, like policy reform, like procurement changes, and also legal challenges. And then finally, I think someone in the crowd mentioned metrics. How are we actually tracking our changes? And something that we're doing at the Caribbean Against Apartheid in Palestine movement is that we are looking at financial flows. We're looking at contract changes. We're looking at votes passed. We're looking at the data that our actions then create. And how do we analyze that? And how do we get the right evidence? So I'd stop there, but let others speak.
Thank you, Priyanka. Badlishah.
All right.
I'll go back to my earlier example of how we managed to get the change in legislation for a freer and a fairer elections in Malaysia. Now, the symbolic win was, of course, we managed to get protests, the number of protesters going to the streets in huge numbers. But there was also another fundamental strategy as well, where we made alliances with various segments of the, just now I said about the youth, but we also made alliances with the Chinese. My country is 65% Muslims, 35% are non-Muslims, and they comprise, the non-Muslims comprise of a significant number of Chinese people. Okay? So we managed to get the Chinese to be together with the campaign. So on the Palestine campaign as well, now we are, one of our strategic focus is also to try to get the Chinese non-Muslims to be on board. Now it's a difficult task as well, because the Chinese always think that Palestine issue is a religious issue. It's the Muslims issue. You know, they are fighting among themselves. You see, so why should I bother myself with the Palestine issue? You know? So these are among the challenges that we face. Yeah? And but now we notice a significant shift in their perception towards the Palestine issue as well, because I've had quite recently a meeting with one of the influential Chinese figures in Malaysia. He told me that now it's very clear it's a genocide. It's no longer self-defense. How can you justify killing people who are queuing for food in Gaza? You cannot justify it anymore. So to them also, it's genocide. So I managed to get one of my articles to be published in one of the main Chinese newspapers in Malaysia just recently. First time I got it, you know, because of that shift in perception among the Chinese. Yeah? And then about a month ago, we had a meeting with the Chinese Association of Independent Schools, because in Malaysia, the Chinese are allowed to operate their own schools, Chinese schools, based on their own curriculum. Of course, they follow the national curriculum, but they add in also some, you know, subjects relating to the Chinese culture and so on. So I had a meeting with the chairman of the Chinese Schools Association, yeah, to improve the students' grasp of the Malay language, because we use that as for unity purposes in Malaysia. We use the Malay language. So we come to them as a friend. We said we want to improve the command of Malay language among the Chinese students. Okay? And then we talk about the Palestine issue. Okay. And then the chairman of the Chinese Schools Association, he told me that, okay, Badlishah will form a joint task force with you on improving the Malay language, but also we will also address the issue of Palestine to the Chinese students. Now, to me, this is a fundamental shift, because we are now building, this is towards educating the next generation of Chinese in Malaysia. It's a huge, I mean, I really, I mean, I couldn't hide my joy at that during that meeting, because to me, to try to educate the next generation is also another strategy that we need to do, not just this particular generation, but looking at the next generation as well. So Alhamdulillah, he agreed to that, and we've already formed the joint task force just recently. So now we are trying to get into the, so because when you target the next generation, it will become, you know, easier for you to address the Palestine issue. So this, I think, something that you know, I'd like to share with you all, that some of the strategies that we need to do as well for the Palestine issue. But thank you very much.
Thank you, Badlishah. Pádraig?
Yeah, the question jars with me a little bit, because what are the objectives of everybody in this room? The objectives are freedom and justice for the Palestinian people. That's our ultimate goal. So everything that's been outlined is a door, if you want to call that a symbolic victory. But everything that advances that cause is good, And we talked earlier about protests, 29 protests since October 2023, huge protests, the smallest, 80,000, which is huge in its own right in this city. But that gave people an outlet to be involved, to express their anger. It gave people an opportunity to be activists. And the next generation, a speaker earlier talked about giving young people their place, giving them leadership. That brings through the next generation. So there's the objectives, there's the strategy. You must have a strategy. Our strategy today is to build a global alliance. I was listening earlier to our speakers, Medea there in the United States and Yasmin in Germany. And Yasmin, the pressure, the huge pressure that you're facing. So what supports can we give? Legal supports, solidarity supports, digital media. In the United States, I mean, I found what you said uplifting earlier, because a lot of people would think that Donald Trump is the United States, that the people who are funded by the Israeli lobby are the United States. But as you said, you can see the change, in New York, and there, there's another United States, of activists, of students, and campuses, of pushback. So I suppose it's given support to each other, particularly those, like I'm in Ireland, and in Ireland we were a colonized country. We suffered oppression, we suffered a great hunger, we lost a huge, so instinctively we are, anti-imperialist, anti-colonial. So it's easier for me in Ireland to operate as a supporter of the Palestinian people. But we have our strategy, we have our tactics. It's broad-based. I mean, I'm here today, I'm a Sinn Féin TD, Member of Parliament, but Sinn Féin alone will not get victory for the Palestinian people in Ireland. It has to be a broad-based movement. You must step back. You must have humility. You must let the grassroots rise organically to the top. So I suppose the question jars with me, frankly, because I don't want to dismiss gains as just symbolic. They don't mean anything. Everything means something. The waving of a Palestinian flag in one village or town surely gives hope to somebody in Gaza who's looking at bombs coming at them. Somebody cares about me, the defiance of kneecap, I'm so proud of those young lads from our country, So everything is beneficial as long as you're focused on the objective. What is the objective of your action on the other side? Everything is useful.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Pádraig. Leah?
Thank you. Obviously people have said a lot that I might have said, but I feel maybe this is a time I should just talk a little bit about, the Jewish hat and the factor that's in the concept paper about addressing the weaponization of anti-Semitism. So the organizations I'm connected to are absolutely clear. It is nothing to do. It's not about us. And one of the things is that the Israelis government and the Israeli apologists want to make it about us, and it isn't about us. I don't go around in the rest of my life saying I'm a Jewish woman against the cuts, I'm a Jewish woman for free healthcare, etc. But unfortunately on this issue, it's necessary. I'm not the only person in this room connected with Global Jews for Palestine. Chaim is over there, I want to give us a wave. His organization, Jewish Network for Palestine, is also a member. I find it really helpful what Pádraig said. I mean, I've been trying to write an article myself for our own website about the wins, because we here, it's very easy to share the information rightly about how terrible things are, and that can just leave us very, very depressed. It doesn't mean we need to overstate the wins and pretend that we've broken through, but yeah, every step counts, and every small victory helps to inspire people to that possibility I mentioned earlier, that this will end, and it will not just end but it will end with a move towards a liberation for the Palestinians. So we must, and this may be a later question, but one of the things by being connected, more connected internationally, is it's not just sharing the wins in our country. We have just, in my hometown, the very first town in this country has actually decided to, at last, I don't quite know the wording, but basically support the twinning with Al-Mawasi. The local Palestine Solidarity Campaign branch has been linked with Al-Mawasi, which no one had heard of. It was just like we're a fishing town, they're a fishing village. And it is the first place that's actually linked with somewhere in Gaza. That took an enormous amount of work, for which I take no credit. That's the local branch. But finally, with some very emotional speeches just over a week ago, that motion got passed. We need people to know that, not because it's my hometown, but because that is a difference. And I can tell you on the messages on WhatsApp from the people in Al-Mawasi who we're connected to, they are so, even though they are desperate and exhausted physically and mentally, they are so uplifted by that. So we must make the most of the wins that we have, because for those people who haven't been in this game for so long, and it seems an impossibility, we have to big up the wins rationally and so on, but we mustn't forget those. I was going to say a bit more about the Jewish things. The presence of Jewish people on the demonstrations, the actions that Jewish Voice of Peace, in the United States, blocking Grand Central Station, surrounding the Statue of Liberty, blocking, I think it was Brooklyn Bridge, being arrested in their huge numbers. These smaller actions, I mean, there is a group in Ireland, Latvia, tiny groups of people. Jews have felt the absolute need to stand up and make it very clear, not just that it's not in our name, but that we absolutely stand with the Palestinians. And the more that we can give voice to the Palestinians, the more I'm very happy to step back. But while it still counts, I will be shouting loud and clear as a Jewish person, but I will never stop. I will never stop being silent. I'll never be silenced about the general thing. I could talk a lot, unfortunately, about that horrible issue. But
Thank you very much, Leah. Now, Shamiul.
Okay, so obviously I agree with everything about symbolism. It's important. It's everything's a stepping stone in the right direction. Agree. Unless that symbolism is actually playing you, unless that symbolism is actually stopping the movement. I'll give a clear example here. So if you look back, let's just say 15 years ago, there was no real voice in the Labour Party in terms of Palestine. Then you have something called LFPME, Labour Friends of Palestine Middle East, come about, right? Seems like a win. It's a win, symbolic win. It's there. There is no voice on Palestine. It's there. It's good. Now, it sounds good. It's a good win. But then if you look at how LFPME, which looks like a symbolic win in terms of the policy, how much they've spoken out, or lack of, how much impact that's making, how much that's actually restricting people from getting more involved. That, for me, it looks like a symbolic win, and it feels like, oh, they've got something. But that tick box is working against us, because it feels as though it's doing more than it is. So sometimes you've got to look at the symbolism and see, you know what, is that symbolism just playing us? Is it there as a tool to keep us silent? Because again, if you look at LFPME and the members in LFPME, how many members are also in Labour Friends of Israel? Look at it. So it doesn't take, if I can work it out, man, and I'm sure everyone else can work it out, let's just put it that way, right? Yes, that's me done on symbolism. But I'm also keen really to kind of get this bit, us guys, done quickly, because there's so much from here that I think we need to kind of get to in all honesty. So we'll go to the next question.
Thank you very much, Shamiul. So now for time management issues, we are going to direct questions to 3 of you each question. And then we'll go to the last question that we need all of you to answer. So the next question will be to Ben, to Leah, and to Badlishah. And the question is, in confronting state repression, what kinds of legal political infrastructure are needed across borders to protect organizers and campaigns? Now I'm going to kindly ask you to answer in 2 minutes. Thank you so much. The only person who can mute me here is Shamiul because we are sharing the mic, so I don't have a mic to stop him.
Oh,
You can go, Leah.
me. Yeah, not my area of expertise, so I'm not going to waste too much of your time. We obviously do have to have friendly lawyers. I don't know what the answer to this question is. It's a really complicated, and particularly across borders. Unfortunately, I feel very flummoxed because of the failure of international law. And so I'm not going to waste any more of your time. I'm sure these experts over here will.
Thank you, Leah. Badlishah.
Okay. I think one of the things that we can, one of the speakers in the earlier panel discussion also mentioned about this. I think one of the things that we can also embark upon to protect, or rather to, so that we can sustain the campaign, is to have regional coalitions. For example, now in our region, ASEAN region, Association of Southeast Asian Nations, there is an ASEAN Parliamentary Caucus on Palestine. Now, just to share with you, there is already a Malaysian Parliament Caucus on Palestine, and then there's also another Indonesian Parliament Caucus on Palestine. So they've come together and formed the ASEAN Parliamentary Caucus on Palestine. Now, this is also not easy because there are 10 countries in ASEAN, and not all of the countries, are in tune with the issue of Palestine. We have Thailand, which I think you all know, and then you have Singapore. Of course, we all know what's the position of Singapore and so on. So it's also not an easy task to form an ASEAN Parliamentary Caucus on Palestine. But if this can be achieved, it's going to be started with the two countries first, Malaysia and Indonesia. But if this idea can be shared or can be accepted, can be embraced by the other countries within ASEAN, this is also another big step forward as well, to have the regional collaboration on the issue of Palestine. We are also trying to form another one, a regional collaboration of NGOs, non-governmental organizations. This is the Parliamentary Caucus, but there's also another attempt to set up a regional collaboration of NGOs, non-governmental organizations on Palestine. I think we need this because we have to amplify. We have to amplify these messages of solidarity with the Palestine and so on. We need to cross borders. We need to end this global alliance for Palestine. I think it's a timely effort. Kudos to the organizers of this conference. So from this conference, I was discussing with my friend just now. We may also organize probably a similar conference in Malaysia, but inviting participants from the region in ASEAN and so on to talk about this as well, because this issue now has become a humanitarian. It's a global issue now. How do we globalize the issue of Palestine within our own communities, within our own nations? We need that international solidarity, and that will exert pressure upon the governments. So this is still in the infancy stage, but we, as someone said just now, I think it was Priyanka who said, this is the entry point. And also, I think Leah also mentioned that we need to have wins upon wins that will lead to the structured reform. So hopefully this will lead to something. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Badlishah. Ben?
Yeah, so listen, the state repression of solidarity and activism in support of the rights of Palestinian people is something that every single person in this room, wherever you are working, I know will be familiar with. It has been a reality for decades, I think ramped up, in my experience, particularly in the last 10 to 15 years in response to the growing support for the global BDS movement. It's been on steroids in many dimensions in the last 2 years because of the growth of solidarity in response to the genocide. as a first general principle, we have to remember, because every single person who is showing solidarity with the Palestinian people is forced to devote energy to protecting their rights to do that. And that, the danger of that is it's a distraction. And in protecting our rights, which we have to do, we have to remember why are we being silenced. And the reason ultimately is to try to leave the Palestinian people isolated in their struggle for liberation. So part of the way we respond to this is always to redouble our efforts, escalate our actions, and not be silenced. But what do we need in terms of structures of support? The first thing I would say, I'm going to focus on two things. The first is we need a broad umbrella, and we need the support of the civil society organizations that exist to protect civil liberties, recognizing that in many, many ways for years, the litmus test in terms of protection of core democratic freedoms are the rights of people to advocate in solidarity with the Palestinian people. And that's sometimes been a difficult argument to get some of those bodies to recognize that an attack on the rights of people to demonstrate and protest in support of Palestinian rights is a fundamental attack on core democratic freedoms. I think that has shifted in the last 2 years. In the UK, I think we've seen that in the broad umbrella that rose up to oppose the prescription of Palestine action. 5 or 6 years ago, when there was an attempt, the first beginnings of the attempt to normalize the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism, we had extraordinary difficulties. In fact, we failed to get the support of the key civil liberty organizations in the UK to oppose that adoption. So I think there's been a fundamental shift. But alongside that broad umbrella, I think the other thing we need, and rooted within the movement, are the right bodies that can provide us with the legal support structures we need. And on this, I would say, and I think there's a general point here, if the purpose of today is to look at how do we coordinate efforts and create structures of support, a broad message is don't reinvent the wheel or seek to create alternatives to things that are working well, that exist but need support. And in that dimension, a body to whose attention I would bring you all is the European Legal Support Centre, which is doing quite extraordinary work in protecting institutions, organisations and individual activists. It is solely focused on supporting those advocating for Palestinian rights who are coming under attack, and has won very, very important victories across a whole range of dimensions in the academic environment, protecting students and academics, protecting institutions, protecting individuals who face disciplinary action at work. But it is a body that is massively under-resourced. It is under huge strain in terms of the volume of cases. And right now here in the UK, in particular, it is swamped with cases that is coming from the health sector. Doctors and nurses who are under investigation because they've been standing up in support of Palestinian rights, coming to demonstrations or saying things on social media. So we don't need to reinvent the wheel, but we need bodies like that, because the importance of them, they provide the legal expertise, but they are rooted in the movement. They understand what's the dimension of the narratives that come, what are the familiar tactics, and how do you neutralize them, and how do you push back against them.
Thank you, Ben. Now, bringing again to the three other participants, what risks and opportunities arise from engaging directly with state actors? Starting with Priyanka.
Sorry, to go back on the last question, I just wanted to make 2 points that hadn't been made. Specifically around how do we protect organizers and individuals that go beyond legal structures? As an individual, if you need to be empowered with the tools and the knowledge so that you can stand up for your rights. So I'd love to educate for more education and capacity building. So training grassroots groups on their rights, on their protest rights. And secondly, digital security. We are documenting a televised genocide on platforms that are complicit. So I also would like to advocate for more secure communications, anti-surveillance tech, safe online organizational spaces. And we can do that by recruiting and working with a diverse group of individuals that can bring these skill sets to the Alliance. So we go, we have legal infrastructures in place. The UK Lawyers for Palestine Committee has already been established since October the 7th. This is great, but we need something that's transnational legal defense networks, political infrastructures, digital security, and education. So I'd like to just add in those 2 points on that last question. Risks and opportunities that arise from engaging directly with state actors. A lot of risks, but I think I'll say one example of an opportunity from working in Barbados with the Caribbean island states. Because we are small island states, the consequences we take are more direct because we can get closer to state actors. The ability for us to launch this Supreme Court genocide case in Barbados was because we are a population of 250,000 people, and therefore we are able to mobilize quite quickly. So I would say the opportunities are obviously around legal action, really ensuring that every country and every movement knows how do you go about enforcing international jurisdiction as part of domestic law within your country or state. Policy influencing policy. I mean, we've all talked about this today. How are we effectively lobbying for arms embargoes and recognizing Palestinian statehood? We can also engage with state actors for resource access. It'd be very interesting to hear people's reflections on the funding, the platforms, and the protections that can arise from engaging directly with state actors. And then I guess, to talk a bit more about the risks, this has been mentioned already, but surveillance and repression. We've seen this, obviously, Ben, Chris, the PSC activists that have, there's been a lot of arrests of PSC campaigners, the criminalization, the draconian laws that have been enforced by the Met Police and the UK government on activists has led to an increase scrutiny and targeting of organisers. The co-optation, so movements may be diluted to meet diplomatic norms. That's another key risk. And also grassroots alienation. We've seen that a lot. So when engaging with state actors, we often lose the trust and the voice of grassroots movements.
Thank you, Priyanka. Pádraig?
Yeah, so I said the earlier question in relation to symbolic wins versus structural change. So again, for me, you go back to the objective. So the objective is the freedom with justice for the Palestinian people, and every single initiative is useful, but it has to then move to structural change, to legal change. I mean, when I think of Ireland, it's 2014 that we had a motion unanimously, entirely passed, calling for the recognition of the State of Palestine. 10 years later, it was actually acted upon by the Irish government in the face of genocide. It took genocide for it actually to be acted on. But I didn't see that as a wasted initiative. It was sitting there. We could say that the Irish Parliament has unanimously recognise the State of Palestine, even if our government hasn't followed through. They have now. Of course, Norway and Spain have joined them. We hear that France are about to do the same. But that is important. And so, in Ireland, we have the Occupied Territories Bill. Isn't it crazy that we have to even debate that we would not do commerce with war criminals? And that was before the genocide. That we don't, under international law, it is a war crime to occupy and displace somebody from their territory. It's crystal clear. So we were doing commerce and business. So it's painfully slow when you engage with governments. They are obviously under the influence of our powerful governments. But I think that's the pathway. You know, that is the pathway to eventually. I mean, I think I go back to where I started, South Africa, and Frank's excellent speech earlier. You know, it wasn't till the very end, you know, that these powerful governments, elites, caved in. So it's incremental, and every part of it's important, not to be dismissed. I mean, of course, we know the difference between a symbolic victory. I mean, I'm thinking of Mustafa, you know, and the challenge, you know, as we speak, you know, we despair, you know, I thought my threshold for horror, you know, how many images do you have to see? And I looked at one yesterday of a mother, the house had been demolished, you know, her children were dead, her brothers, her family were dragging her away. You know, the horror never leaves you. But so we understand what appears to be nothing in the face of such injustice. But every part of it gets you along the way. And then it starts with grassroots. It starts with the people who wouldn't handle the South African fruit. It ends up with government, and eventually we win. So all of it is to be measured, and none of it is to be undervalued.
Thank you, Pádraig. Shamiul?
Yeah, exactly that. Look, if we're talking, what are we talking about? Sorry, what was the question? I lost my throat. Yeah, so state actors, look. The whole point of everything we're doing, the mobilization of our communities, the encouragement to get active, it all results in actually engaging with state actors, whether we like it or not. You know, those in power are the ones who get to vote in Parliament, right? So we need to encourage people to engage with state actors. We need to encourage that. We need to encourage that more than we actually think. Because sometimes when I'm in a room and I'm talking to people, and I say, okay, cool, who cares about Palestine? Yes, everyone cares about Palestine. Okay, cool. How many people have like sent an email to your MP? Maybe half, maybe 3/4 put their hand up. How many people have seen their MP? Not that many. Not that many in the room. Now, when I speak to parliamentarians, historically, they'll say, oh, I don't see you guys enough. I don't hear from you guys enough. They're not feeling this pressure. We might be on the streets, but the whole point is how do we translate what's on the streets for the people in Parliament, those who have the ability to vote, who have the ability to stop arming Israel, to actually take those measures. So that's why we need to encourage more access, more of us talking to those state actors, right? So we need to do that more. But however, that's that's in general. However, those in this room who are part of organizations, we need to be careful. We need to be open when we engage with state actors that we don't get co-opted. So, you know, we're talking very openly in those who are in these fields. When you start talking to people, when you start going to portcullis, going to security in those glass rooms, and you start, you know, I'm something now, you know, I'm getting in there. No, everyone else is there. I'm special. I'm speaking one-on-one with these MPs, this, that, the other, and they explain to you, oh, you know what, these protests are good, but, you know, maybe you should do it like this, maybe you should do it like that. And you're like, oh, this guy's my friend. And you're going away and you're relaying things. This is important. This is psychological, and this is something as organizations and people that are involved in the movement need to really, really go in with open eyes. When we engage with state actors, part of that is to keep you down. Because as we've heard before, it's always those in government, always those in power who are last to concede. They're last to concede. Because unfortunately, if you look historically, Nelson Mandela was regarded as a terrorist, right? And Margaret Thatcher said he was a terrorist, ANC terrorist. Now in Parliament, you got a statue of Nelson Mandela. This is where we are. So we engage with open minds and open eyes. Thank you.
Thank you, Shamiul. Now we're gonna bring the discussion to everyone. We would like to hear your opinion on this panel, and yes, go ahead.
Thank you. I'm from Finland, from the Finnish Arab Friendship Society. It is the oldest Palestine solidarity organization in Finland, established in 1975. And it's very correct what has been said earlier here many times, and which I support, that we need to enlarge our perspective. We need to enlarge the groups that we are influencing on and we are getting along. And this happens when we have a common ground. This is my opinion, because otherwise we reject some people who are not ready to take a very strong stand in the beginning. we have to see this as a process, because these people will later on, when they get more knowledge, they will take a more radical stand. But we need them in the beginning to be with us, to have a louder voice and more people present. And in Finland, one of our problems has been that the street demonstrations have not gathered a lot of people because they are considered as some kind of a small group of red-green people. And the other political forces are afraid of joining this movement. And by limiting ourselves to the red-green forces, we are limiting also our influence in the whole society. And we need to see that there are organizations and social circles in the society that are very important to people and which gather a lot of people. Such organizations include sports clubs, especially football, and church and other religious organizations. And we have got a very positive response from the Finnish state church, the Lutheran church. Many people from the leadership of the church are willing to participate. But we have also received opposition inside the movement that we cannot take any religious people as speakers in the demonstration, and this is something which I really don't accept, and it's difficult to understand even. And there are so many such organizations that we simply have to look around and try to influence these people. And oh yes, the question which Mustafa put earlier about the media. I'm a retired mainstream journalist. I worked in the Finnish news agency earlier. And I know from my experience that the main implicator who has the biggest influence in the media, in the Western countries, in the small Western countries, is what the mainstream media in America and Britain write. So what BBC writes, what CNN, New York Times, what these write is what is quoted then and influencing in the media in the smaller countries. This is how the media works, because it's Reuters, AFP, and the big media that influence. And there has been a change in many ways in this respect. And I can see it in Finland, that earlier our media bought every single lie that Israel was producing. Now this has diminished. They have become more critical. And this is thanks to these big Western news media outlets. And in this we have to thank Mustafa very much, because he has been really essential, a key person in this respect. And I'm personally very grateful, and I hope you all are too.
Thank you very much. I'll try to create a cue here in my head.
I have one more line, and this is that we need also regional cooperation with our neighboring countries. That I have here met a colleague from Sweden and Norway, and I hope that if there's somebody from Denmark, please announce yourself. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm going to ask you kindly your cooperation and time, so please be brief in your contribution here. We can go with, yes, our brother here in green.
Hi everybody. I'm here from Al-Aqsa, Palestina. It's a group in. I'm here from Al-Aqsa, Palestina. It's a group in the south of Spain, in Malaga. It's a solidarity group. It's a very active group. If you're on holiday in Malaga, please come and see us. We have many activities. Our question comes a little bit from the context of the south of Spain. In the south of Spain and in other places in Europe as well, the right and the extreme right is, gaining a lot of ground. So our question is that we shouldn't, we think that it's an important point that we shouldn't forget that the story of Palestine is a battle of stories. And the extreme right and the right wing has been winning the battle and been winning the narrative because they have a kind of simple story. It's easy for people to understand. and we'd like to know how can we also create a simple message, a narrative, which is easy to share and easy for people to understand. How can we express that more clearly?
Thank you very much. Just to finish this slide, I'm actually our brother there in gray. Thank you. Yes, you.
Thank you. Hi everyone, I'm Yusuf from the Association of Student Activism for Palestine. I think the student activism movement is a very important part of this struggle, and I don't feel it's been mentioned enough today. And just one of the things that they're really struggling with, the students, I'm no longer a student by any stretch, by the way, I'm just on the organization, is that the universities are actively repressing a lot of the stuff that they're doing to change policy on the ground. And I think that a lot of that comes from Zionist pressure, so lobbies, Zionist groups pressuring the universities to change the way that they allow protests and stuff to happen on campus. So I think one of the things that the students are lacking at the moment is support from the wider movement. We have tried to link them up with organizations to provide legal support and strategic support. We do that as well. But I think that as a movement, we need to get together and just think of a strategy on how we tackle university activism, because I think that's a very important part of the movement. The second thing I was going to say from a personal capacity is I actually have engaged with my MP, and it's not as fruitful as perhaps it might be painted, because a lot of them have underlying assumptions, and those assumptions, unfortunately, my MP is David Simmons in Pinner, and when we had conversations with him, he will always deflect and blame Hamas for everything. So those children are being shot in the arms because Hamas is telling people not to get food from these organizations. Like, everything that he says is meant to deflect the criticism away from Israel. And I think as a movement, we need to come up with arguments. And I think it goes back to Dr. Mustafa's point on communication strategy. But we really do need to have a united message that we put out there. And I think that's an important thing for us to talk about. Thank you.
Thank you very much, my brother. Don't vote for him anymore. And then our sister here.
Hi there, my name is Ragad and I'm the chair of Muslim Association of Britain, one of the organizations in the Palestine Coalition. And I think the aspect of strategic influence and impact is the key and objective of this gathering, really. And it is how to collect all the refreshing achievements that we've heard from our panelists here in the previous session and what is going to come, to create this movement that is going to be so influential strategically. And I think, I don't want to be biased, but our coalition in the UK is truly a model to be implemented in other spaces because of the success of it. So if I was to think of the attempts to divide this movement, even to the extent that some of the organizations were labeled as extremist, or an attempt to label them as extremist to break this coalition because of the effectiveness of this coalition. And I think individually, of course, we would have gone about and done things. But for this coalition to remain for over more than 20 years or so, you know, especially during the last 2 years in that kind of power, it is telling of how important it is to replicate this kind of coalitions within the organizations. We're very different, by the way. We have different opinions on many divisive issues, but we try to look for the common ground. And that is why I think this model has happened, was implemented, had strategic influence, in my opinion, and I think it can be extended to this global alliance on a larger scale.
Thank you very much. So now we have a situation with time management that, due to our easygoing and very permissive moderation methods, we don't have the time to listen to everyone, but we would like the first 3 people who raise their arms here in this part of the panel, and 1 person from there who raised first as well, that to bring their contributions. And I'm sorry for everyone else, because we have to bring back to our panelists.
Thanks. First of all, I want to say the obvious. This is an excellent panel because each and every one of you has done your best to exemplify the issues that we are discussing. So thank you for that. I'm Haim Rashid, and I'm representing here the European Jews for Palestine, which is not a member organization, but it's a coalition of anti-Zionist Jewish groups in Europe. There are more than 36 organizations already members of the coalition, and we represent, I would say, few 100,000 Jews in Europe, which is not to be sniffed at. Now, one of the things that we have organized is the first European Jewish anti-Zionist Congress last month in Vienna. More than 1,000 Jews and Palestinians came to this, and we are now organizing the next Congress, which we hope to be in Dublin. So, and of course, you know, our friends from the panel will help us in doing that. Now, I just want to say that the presentation of the problem that Ben has given us is really excellent. How do we do something that actually brings us forward? And that's sometimes very difficult to work out. But I want to present to you the problem. A number of people here said that anti-Zionism is essential for actually not just understanding, but actually explaining the problems that we're facing. And that wasn't really reacted to. And I want to say that I cut my political teeth on the South African opposition to apartheid. And the common ground there was very clear. We're not against white people. We're not against a specific regulation or legislation. We're against apartheid, and everyone can understand it, and everyone can see the need to act against it. Now, I want to challenge the panel by saying that we are against Zionism. Zionism is the apartheid of the Israeli system against the Palestinians. It's not the genocide. It's not the ethnic cleansing. These are the results of Zionism. Zionism is the disease, and those are side effects. Now, of course, we have to fight against the side effects, but by fighting the side effects, you are not doing anything against the disease. And I think that once we establish that the problem is Zionism, this is the specific form of apartheid that the Zionist project, which is a settler colonial project, is using against the Palestinians. Now, that is what we need to explain, and that's what we need to use. And therefore, it's not to leave your belief at the door, as someone said, but actually to use what we understand about this specific form of racism and genocide and apartheid and ethnic cleansing. That is what we need to use in the campaign of this coalition, which definitely the European Jews for Palestine will be the first to join. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Look, we have a situation with time management again, and we only have time for one more contribution. So for gender balance, I'm going to bring to the person here, to the woman here who raised her hand. I'm so sorry for that.
Hi, I'm with Code Pink. First of all, a big thank you to all the amazing volunteers making this happen, security, everyone taking part, but thank you. Yeah, volunteers are amazing, so thank you. I'm with Code Pink. I'm Iranian, but I hold US and UK citizenship, so it's a complicated situation. Thank you for all your contributions. It was fascinating to hear about the Supreme Court case in Barbados. I'm curious, did you choose Barbados? Obviously, Mia Mottley was one of the first leaders globally in November 23. She said it was perhaps the first televised genocide. So curious how you chose Barbados. how you see this potentially rolling out. It's fascinating that you're going also after the Israeli tourists, war crimes. We've seen those videos go viral. Thanks also for bringing up digital security. But just, yeah, and obviously, I only found out recently by being in Barbados that it had as many slaves from Africa as the United States. So it's obviously got such a fascinating history. But if you could say more, that'd be great. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I'm sitting down again, bringing back to our panelists. So on the context of our Global Alliance for Palestine, I would like you to elaborate on the contributions as well, but you have 1 minute each. I'm so sorry to tell you that. And we're going to start from Ben.
Can I just check, because we were given the final question, you don't want us to address that, you want us to come back on the...
I'm so sorry for that, but because of the time management, we have to finish this session. 45 seconds. We actually had the biggest panel time, but I was very permissive on time management, so yeah, we're dealing with that right now.
If we're coming back, it's very hard in 45 seconds to come back on all the contributions. I mean, I want to pick up one thing that was said in relation to students. You know, right? We've not focused on students, and apologies, I didn't catch where you're from, but I agree. Look, in terms of that was linked to the question I think about repression of activism. It's absolutely right. It has been a key battleground. That's not by mistake. Many years ago, some of you will recall, there was a very influential report by an Israeli think tank, the Reut Institute, that looked at the danger of Israel becoming strategically isolated because of the growth of success for BDS and said we've got to interrupt all of that. And the way we do it is we delegitimize all activism for Palestine through making it toxic, and it identified universities and campuses, had a specific focus on the UK, as places where this needed to happen. And that's what we've seen unrolling. One of the challenges, I'll just say this, one of the challenges in creating the sort of structures of support, so your question was how do we get the wider movement to support students? One of the challenges is, and I don't say this to be critical because I understand it, very often students want to self-organize. So that sometimes creates barriers between how do we bring them into the wider movement. And actually, I think part of the challenge is how do we support students to develop their own structures of support and navigate the challenges, because again, one of the challenges for all of us as we fight back is that we don't end up solely in a conversation about our right to protest instead of actually carrying on with our protests. I'd like to really have time to address Haim's question, and in 10 seconds I don't think I can. I share a lot of what you said beyond one thing, which is my problem with Zionism. Yes, it's a pernicious racist ideology of Jewish supremacism. My problem is what it is meant in reality for the Palestinian people. Their dispossession, their colonization, and it has led inexorably, because it's a fundamental dynamic. When you say between the river and the sea, one people have rights, the other no rights at all, you can only sustain that ideology by dehumanizing the other. And that's what we're now seeing rolled out in a live stream genocide. So for me, that's not a side effect. That's the fundamental problem with Zionism. If it existed as a pernicious racist ideology that had never been able to manifest itself in a Jewish supremacist state that dispossessed the Palestinian people, I wouldn't have the same issue or concern about it as I do from the fact that right now it's leading to the genocide of the Palestinian people.
Thank you very much, Ben. Please don't mute me like Ben. Your turn, Priyanka. Thank you.
Great. Thank you for the excellent questions. I'll be very brief, but I'll try and address most of them. It was great to hear from the Finland Palestine Solidarity Group. Your point around diverse partnerships, actually being able to include churches, sports, artistic institutions, I completely agree with. I think for the Alliance to truly serve as a collective voice for coordinated international advocacy, you need diverse partnerships and people who can bring different skill sets, different thoughts, different perceptions to this alliance. I think empowering grassroots media, training mentorship opportunities, training the next generation of journalists is something that the alliance, I think, should look into. The point that was made from Malaga and also the European Jews for Palestine around addressing the disease, not the symptom, is absolutely fundamental. fundamental. We need a very clear moral narrative, like we have seen in the anti-apartheid movement in South Africa, and that narrative needs to be made very clear with the asks, why it's important, and what are our demands. Point around universities, I think these have been very important actually in terms of the BDS, because universities have achieved a number of academic wins from divesting, both in front of student unions, but actually divesting from companies that have been complicit in the genocide. So we need to do a lot more to engage you, but I think it would be helpful to know what you would need. What do you need in terms of tools, training, education, so that you can also collectively mobilize in the encampments and within your institutions? And then finally, thank you for the question around the Supreme Court case. So just to say that Barbados hasn't been the only island that has taken action. Obviously, we really had to build on the momentum from last year, where Barbados recognized Palestine as a state, and because there was enough grassroots mobilization, because there was enough concerted action, we then thought, how do we take this to the next level? What's our next strategic action that we need to take? We did have the ministry and the government on our side, because as you said, Mia Mottley was one of the first governments to recognize this as a televised genocide. So the media have been very favorable in the case. They have been able to amplify, the local and the regional media have been able to amplify what our demands are. So we are, riding on the back of that, but we've also galvanized a team from many island states, lawyers, to really help us in evidence gathering and building a very strong case to Barbados. So I would say, yes, it was I guess that the government that really has helped to advocate, but also it's the regional alliance to show that we're greater than the sum of our parts. But I'm happy to talk more about that.
Thank you, Priyanka. Now, Badlishah, we're about to enter the tea break, so I know how complicated this can be in England. So yes.
Well, I'll try to be brief. Thank you very much to everybody who have participated and have given the questions, as the time constraint is places a heavy pressure on us, the panelists, so we cannot entertain all the questions. But I agree, just one point that I would like to highlight. I agree with Ragat, I think from MAB, Muslim Association of Britain, that strategic initiatives is the key towards strategic influence. And I think this is something that we need to work on, so that the global alliance of Palestine, if not, we'll be doing so many things and we will not achieve much. But if we must do it strategically, so that we're able to achieve things and have more impact. Now, I just would like to say that, because I come from Southeast Asia, one of the strategic initiatives that can be done is to have a regional solidarity hub for Southeast Asia on the issue of Palestine. Because Southeast Asia, the former President Joe Biden once mentioned that Southeast Asia is the most strategic place on earth, because we straddle the global south and also the superpowers of US and China. So we are in the most strategic place on earth. So therefore, we need to have, if we can form some sort of regional solidarity hub here for Palestine, I think there will be a great leap forward, inshallah. So, but anyway, I think since you give me only 1 minute, thank you.
Thank you so much, Badlishah. Now, Pádraig.
Yeah, I just want to also refer to our friend from Finland who talked about being dismissed as the Reds and the Greens. And a really positive example was I was privileged to attend and speak at one of the rallies and protests, the huge rallies and protests here in London. And it's testament to the activists, many of them are in this room, that they have developed a broad base. They've made space for people. And I go back to earlier on, the objective is the freedom with justice of the Palestinian people. It's always about Palestine. It's not about your own differences, your own disagreements, because we all have them on the left and, internationally. But it's about leaving aside them and having a broad-based movement. So I offer up our British, English, Scottish, Welsh comrades as an example of how to do that.
Thank you very much, Pádraig. Leah?
Okay, thanks everyone. I don't want to take too long, and yes, there's big discussions around all of the questions. What I wanted to say about a simple message, it may sound very childish, but it actually gets through. It's not fair. What is happening is such an extreme injustice, and people do understand that. It's just not fair. And then I'm sure everyone in this room can give countless examples. I won't waste our time doing that. What I want to say is in relation to the repression, and the example in this session was about the student movement, is the ruling class is terrified. They are terrified of this movement. And I think that we should remember that and take heart from that. They are terrified not only because it's a movement for Palestine, but because people are joining the dots. One of the things I would say about Jewish Voice for Peace in America is that they were very active in supporting the Black Lives Matter movement, that they draw the parallels. The enemy we are fighting is an enemy that not only is attacking the Palestinians, it's attacking the bin workers in Birmingham, which is where Jeremy was yesterday. It's our conditions, it's our welfare services, etc. It's about what sort of world do we want to live in? Do we want to live in a world where justice and opportunity for everybody is what we build towards, and oppose any constraints on that? So we have to take heart. And the question that we didn't get to answer was about the potential of the alliance. And what I would sneak in before I do shut up is we can learn from each other. We should share our wins. We should share in our wins. But we must also be honest with each other about our setbacks. And also we can be greatly strengthened, certainly in Global Jews, and I'm sure the European Jewish Network and in any of our international networks, that actually even though our contexts are different, we can learn hugely from each other by understanding the different contexts better.
Thank you very much, Leah. Shamiul?
Cool. So, for us to get as strong as we can to have that impact, we need to include everyone in our community, everyone who's in the movement. One of the strongest segments in this pro-Palestine movement is the Muslim community. Now, like many countries' representatives have said, there's inclusion, great. There's acknowledgement, not so much. Sometimes acknowledgement has to come properly, because this acknowledgement has to be said from the front. This acknowledgement has to be led. And sometimes those even who are in the movement don't acknowledge us. And this is something that we need to take back into our areas. Sometimes we think, for example, we look at the UK as a great example. Yes, it's a great example. We see ourselves as a Palestine coalition. But if you look at the media sometimes, it focuses on particular organizations. Not the Palestine coalition, but the ones where the Muslims aren't. And what we see from the ground, when we go up and down in our communities, that's not us. So we're not part of it. We're not part of it. We need to be acknowledged. We need to be named. For example, earlier, names were given about organizations that did X, Y, Z. We were there, not acknowledged. We might be there, we're not acknowledged. And if we're not acknowledged, how can we build in our communities? So for us here who are organizers, we must acknowledge who are part of this community. We must acknowledge who's part of this movement, because doing so is an affront to the movement. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Shamiul. Thank you, all of our panelists. Before giving back to Dr. Anas, just one quick reminder. Right now, our boat of the Freedom Flotilla Coalition, the Handala, has just passed the point where the meddling was intercepted 1 month ago. So a quick applause to our brothers and sisters. And tonight, the Minister of Defense of the Zionist entity already said that they want to intercept our mission. So it's very important that all of you keep your eyes on the Handala, all eyes on Gaza, and that you have the same commitment, that the same support that you gave to us on the meddling mission, that you give to our brothers and sisters on the Handala. They will really need that. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Thiago, and thank you to the panel. That was a fantastic session. Thank you so much. Thank you to everyone also who took part in the Q&A session. And your notes are being relayed to the final statement team, who are taking them down and also receiving some suggestions. Hopefully by 5 o'clock, we'll be able to read out the final version of the statement today. Now, I'm here because right now I'm standing between you and your break, not the most favorable position to be in, but ultimately we need to leave today with something to do. And I think that we're all here quite desperately seeking something to do. Many people come up to me. Only yesterday I was at the mosque in my Friday prayers and someone met me at the door and said, listen, I honestly don't know what more to do. I'm giving money, but I don't know what to do. And I feel incredible desperation. And that is the feeling everywhere. But we can't afford to despair. We can't afford to get tired. We can't afford to get bored. So, the first thing is, and we are here to build something, to add something to the global movement that is absolutely remarkable, absolutely unprecedented. We need to add to that. Our lovely volunteers have just given out some copies of what is titled the Draft Constitution for the Global Alliance for Palestine. Now, the way this will work, obviously, as you can probably gauge, it's 10 pages long. So we're not going to discuss item by item. We're not going to go through it because we won't finish next week. But what we will do is this is now with you, and it will be hopefully soon on the website. This will be handed over to the interim executive, who will take care of building the alliance, of reaching out to all the movements around the world that we've spoken about, whether it be Southeast Asia, whether it be Europe, the anti-apartheid movement in South Africa, whether it be the Latin America Alliance, and so on. And one of the main tasks given to the executive committee will be to amend, to look through, to receive your suggestions. There will be a link where everyone, within a month, now a month, today's the 26th of July, we're talking about the 26th of August. We have a month to go through this document and to send in whatever amendments, additions, objections that we have, so that the executive can look at everything and take hopefully everything on board. And then we present this document as the working document to the next conference. So this is something for all of us to do. Okay? So please have a look at it. Look it up on our website. Bear in mind, it's only a month. And I say a month, it's only a month. So make sure to look at it quickly and to come back with your notes and your additions. So that's from me for the Constitution. The rest of the day will look like this. We're going to have a 10-minute break. We're going to come back. We're going to have the third session. And this session is about building the alliance. Is about what we want to leave this room with today. Hopefully we'll have a very good discussion. Many of us who will take part in the panel will be people who have been part of alliances, who have gone through successes as well as failures. So they'll know what to look out for. After that, we'll also take a short break, but then come back for the closing session, where hopefully we'll have the final statement read out, and we'll have a short word from both Jeremy Corbyn as well as our guest from Palestine, Mustafa al-Barghouthi. And we also have, let's not forget, a few video messages from international figures who couldn't be with us today. So please, 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 let's make the most of the few hours that we have left. I appreciate your presence. I appreciate your participation and contribution. Have a nice 10-minute break, 10-minute break, 10-minute break, and see you in a bit, in 10 minutes.